While we wait for that, let's turn our attention to the business agenda. And 1.2 million jobs have been lost in the first 3 months in the Eurozone. Unemployment is soaring at a record rate. Those figures show the scale of the crisis, worse than anything Europe has seen since it started keeping data on the euro currency. 1.2 million jobs lost in Q1. The worst affected country is Spain, where the number of people with a job is down by more than 3% from a year ago. Now, of course, you'll know that Spain has an unemployment rate well over 15%. And the International Labour Organization is bringing together heads of states starting today in Geneva to discuss this crisis.
We need rules which become norms and which everybody has to accept. It's not a question of harmonizing in detail all labor legislation. We're not even talking about imposing on the poorest countries the social standards of the richest countries. That would be absurd. But we're talking about setting up amongst nations a system of rules which brings everyone up instead of everyone pulling everyone down.
That was the opening part of the Geneva summit, and now joining me live from there is the Director General of the ILO, Juan Somavia. Good morning, or good evening to you, Director General. Let us begin. The job losses that we are seeing in this recession, how does it differ from previous times, and why do you believe it is worse?
First of all, the volume. The worst-case scenario for this year is about 50 million jobs lost worldwide. And secondly, because it is worldwide, it's a systemic crisis. So the old way of getting out of the crisis, which is normally export yourself out of the crisis, is no longer possible. Nobody's buying. But
you see, if that is the problem, I suppose I turn round to you, sir, and say, well, tell me something I didn't know. I mean, we know this, so what's the point of you all getting together in Geneva?
The central thing is that what we have been doing is concentrating on the financial system and concentrating on stimulus packages that have not really been geared towards employment creation and social protection. And the key thing that these presidents are saying is we have a systemic problem. President Sarkozy has just said it, but President Lula said the same thing. And we have to concentrate our policies on job creation and social protection.
Right,
so what we're proposing here through a...
But this is against the... Forgive me for interrupting, but this is against the idea that most central banks and governors and finance ministers tend to look at inflation in terms of their primary economic objective. And what you're saying is you want employment.
Sure. The Federal Reserve Bank in the United States has employment and inflation. The International Monetary Fund has full employment among its objectives. The World Trade Organization has full employment. We've totally forgotten that it's about people's lives and employment. So certainly targeting employment, ensuring that you put a social floor under the economy so people can consume, is certainly an economic objective that permits the recovery. It's both socially useful, but it's also economically practical.
The thing is, though, we now know for a fact, because of history, that it will be at least, and you said this earlier today, it'll be 4 to 5 years before we are anywhere near gaining back the jobs that we are losing.
That's if we do exactly the same policies of the past. Precisely what we're saying, we can reduce that lag time if we concentrate on job creation and social protection, both useful for the recovery. Now, I understand that this is not the way people have thought before, but that's the change that is necessary. And we're certainly not going to get out of this crisis by repeating the mistakes that led to the crisis.
The only problem with that is it won't be long before governments start pulling back on their budget deficit spending. And that, of course, makes the situation worse. So what is the one thing that you want governments to do more than anything else? The one policy you want to see introduced?
Look, solve the financial problem. Get the credit flowing. Concentrate on smaller enterprises. Concentrate on facilitating the job creation that smaller enterprises give. But don't forget that jobs alone is not enough. You need a social protection floor. And then you can reduce the lag. We all have to have in mind that the objective of every policy that we put in place, reduce the lag time until we recover the jobs that we had before the crisis. And then that situation wasn't that good because we know perfectly well that the world already had a decent work deficit. Okay. Concentrate on jobs.
Finally, do you fear that the leaders make great noises, they pay good lip service, but the policies won't follow on afterwards?
Look, there's always the following danger. You get a little bit of growth, the stock markets are up, and people are going to say, well, you know, finally it bottomed out, and in the end, yes, there was a horrible crisis in the financial sector, but everything was all right. What Sarkozy and Lula both said, remember they come from different ideological angles, the system didn't function. The system needs to be changed. And that's the main message. We have to act now on the jobs and social protection towards the future. We need a globalization that is fairer, greener, and more sustainable. And that was the message that two presidents coming from different angles said today. We should listen to them.
Mr. Somavia, many thanks for joining us from Geneva, the Director General of the ILO, live here on Crestmeans Business.